Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to episode 4 of the Short Story, StoryShort podcast. Today's guest is my good friend and filmmaker, Adam Clay, who's here to talk about his short film, M.A.N. I wanted to have Adam on because Adam is such a great filmmaker. He's incredibly talented, and I really loved his film. And leading up to this point, he's mostly just done private screenings and like director Q&As. And so he's kind of releasing it to a wider audience. And so I wanted to have him on to talk about it because I think it's a really important film. It's thought-provoking. It's different. It's very different, and I love that about it. And I just think that it causes or it creates a really great conversation, and that's definitely what we'll get into on this episode. So without further ado, episode 4, Adam Clay, let's get it started. How's it going, Adam?
It's going.
Good. How's 2019 treating you?
So far, so good.
Yeah?
Yeah, just working a lot, side projects, and family and friends.
Awesome. Very cool. So Adam, you're a man of many talents. But the one that always was really cool to me and really interesting to me was all the work you do for, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Blue Devils, right? It's a drumline.
Yeah, Concord Blue Devils.
Very cool. And so you kind of, for a lot of people that I know, you kind of live or a lot of people are jealous of some of the access that you get. So you do work through the Concord Blue Devils, but you actually essentially work for the Golden State Warriors and the 49ers.
Yeah, I play for their drumline.
Very cool. And that's usually like at halftime?
Yeah, it depends on the game. Usually
Yeah.
For Warriors, it's a timeout somewhere in the second half of the game. For 49ers, we go out, play for the tailgaters, and we'll play on stage a couple times outside of the gates, and then we'll do 2 or 3 performances during the game.
Very cool. And how long have you been involved with drumline? And
Ooh, man. Well, I've been drumming since I was 7. I've been in drumline since 7th grade. So what's that, 11 or 12?
Yeah, don't ask me to do math.
Yeah,
I'm terrible.
I make movies, man. Me
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you've been super involved, and I just love all the photos that you share on Instagram, and just going out on the field, videos that people take of you at halftime and stuff. It's really cool.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. And so that's awesome. And I think we do have to tell everybody that so I actually met you working for Best Buy.
Yeah.
Many years ago. Yeah. I do want you to tell everybody listening and watching that there was a time when I actually was ripped.
It's true.
It's
true.
That I'm capable of not eating a lot.
Oh, man. Now I remember you could always come in with your protein shakes and your whey and
the jug of water.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah, those are the days. I wish I could still eat like that, but unfortunately I can't. So before we get into your film, M.A.N, M.A.N, it's an analogy, and we'll get to that. What made you want to become a filmmaker?
The earliest memory that I have of wanting to be a filmmaker, I remember being in 1st grade, and it was the day that I graduated 1st grade, and my parents took me to see Men in Black. And I had already been a huge Will Smith fan, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And I think just seeing, where a movie could take you, that it was when I decided I wanted to direct. Mm-hmm. And that was just something that never went away for me. I also come from a family of storytellers, detailed storytellers. So I think it's just kind of, inherent for me. Mm-hmm. I think it's something that has called to me and just hasn't stopped,
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the older I've gotten and the more I've learned about the industry and what it takes to make a film, it is just a huge adrenaline rush for me. And you know, I think within the last couple of years, like graduating film school, and especially like going to San Francisco State, where they focus heavily on theory and history, it's just something for me that it's another language for me to express thoughts and feelings and ideas and philosophies that I don't know if I'd be able to communicate as effectively with just verbal communication.
No, yeah, that's great. And that's the great thing about the film, you know, film, video medium, however you want to characterize it, that there's the moving pictures, there's music, there's colors, there's line, you know, dialogue,
Yeah.
there's graphics. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can get your story point, you know, what have you across versus any other, you know, any
Yeah.
other medium. So that's really cool. And so then you know, made some friends through the years. I know, was it in college? So you went to college at San Francisco State, correct?
Yeah.
Graduated.
Yep. Graduated SF State.
Very cool. With film.
Yeah. Bachelor's in cinema.
Very cool. And so real quick, tell me about The Lone Wanderer.
The Blind Wanderer.
Sorry. Yeah.
That was not the first film that I had directed, but at the time, the biggest film that I had directed. It was for one of the first production classes I took at San Francisco State. And at the time, I was just going through this binge of old samurai movies from the 50s and 60s. Specifically, I mean, of course, like Akira Kurosawa, like Seven Samurai, and also this series on this blind samurai named Zatoichi. And I just wanted to make something that was based on Zatoichi, but, you know, also an homage to these films that I love so much at this time. Yeah. So it was also my first experience, you know, producing a film, and seeing like what it actually took. So like going down to Japantown and Chinatown and buying kimonos and outfits and thinking about, you know, in the movie, there's the Blind Wanderer, who he's kind of like a secret samurai, but then there's these two bandits that show up on this path that the Blind Wanderer normally walks, and they confront him. So thinking about, you know, when I'm in Japantown, Chinatown, what kind of weapons are they going to have? You know, where do these guys come from? What things would they be wearing? Like, how would their hair look? Or, you know, trying to find a location that would feel like it was, you know, Imperial Japan, or which just happened to be a creek next to my house that I've been going to since I was a kid, you know. So it was just like getting creative with like producing a film. And, you know, I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, and you should be, man, because that I have to say that you're, you know, I definitely look up to in so many ways especially with filmmaking, because
Thanks,
like I saw that. And again, you know, when I started this business, I was doing, you know, short documentaries and all that. And don't get me wrong, they were fun to do. Got to know a lot about my clients and customers, and it helped them in their business. So it's a great thing. But ultimately, I've always wanted to make short films, feature-length films, even full-length documentaries. And so when I saw what was capable, right, or what people could be capable of with like no budget, you know, because you think that you need all this money to do stuff, and you really don't.
No,
you just have to be creative, and like, you know, you have to look through that filmmaker's lens. And so that really inspired me. Like, yes, like totally, I'm definitely in the right field. Like, you know, he did this in school, you know, like in class with friends and stuff, and it just was really, I mean, honest to God, I don't say this, you know, I say this with all sincerity, like the quality of it, right? The music, the camera angles and all that was really high quality. I mean, if I didn't know it was a student film, I would have thought it was pulled out of something,
Wow,
you know,
thanks,
like
man.
clip. So yeah, so it was really cool. And so yeah, so anyway, I mean, just really great job. And we'll put a link if you want to share that.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah,
put a link
that's something.
at the end of this video for that. So I have to ask you before we get into Man. I know you're a big, huge fan of Batman.
Yep.
Like gigantic.
Yeah.
And do you still have the decals and all that on your car?
No, I had to take them off.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, so I got window tinting a while ago.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I had some decals on my car for a while.
Yeah.
Mainly like in high school. But
Yeah. Still, it was cool. I mean, you're a huge Batman fan. So I got to ask you, so I guess there are 5 live action iterations of Batman in the movies. Obviously, you can go to cartoons and the TV show and stuff. But as far as the actual movies go, I wanted to know what your top worst. And I know there's a debate about Batman versus Bruce Wayne and which actors are better as Bruce Wayne or Batman. Mm-hmm. But I just look at them as a total package. Like they are Batman and Bruce Wayne. So give me the worst Batman. Or just the number 5,
George Clooney.
Yeah. I feel like Batman and Robin was when Joel Schumacher just kind of was just like, I don't even care anymore. Like,
I mean, don't get me wrong, I love that movie.
Yeah.
But I think I was like 7 or 8 years old when it came out, and that it was just like seeing Batman and all those different characters on screen was awesome. But like, now that I know more about movies, I'm a little bit older. It's like, oh, God. We'll forget about that one.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and it was. I mean, it's a movie that if it's on, I'll watch it. And I don't like hate it per se, but it is the worst.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's the worst. As far as all the Batmans go.
Yeah.
So okay, so George Clooney number 5. Who's number 4?
Val Kilmer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I figured.
Yeah. Same thing with Batman Forever. You know, I loved that movie when I was a kid.
Yeah, and
it's like what you were saying. Like it's one of those movies. If it's on, I'm gonna watch it.
Right.
But, no, it's not. It's not that good.
Yeah. I like. I mean, I'm sure you can agree. Val Kilmer, I mean, is a great actor, and especially when we were younger, and he's been in a lot of iconic films and iconic roles. And there's some good things about his thing with Batman, but ultimately there's better, obviously, which we're about to get into.
Yeah.
So number 3, this is where it gets tough. Kind of.
I would say Ben Affleck.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you liked him?
I liked him more than I thought I would.
Okay.
That was one of those decisions that, you know, when they first came out, were like, oh, Ben Affleck's going to be the next Batman. Mm-hmm. I was one of those people that was like, hell no.
Yeah.
But I will say I was the same way with Heath Ledger as the Joker.
Yeah.
And I was wrong.
Yeah. Sure.
But anyway, Ben Affleck, you know, I'm just trying to stay in the lane of like Ben Affleck as Batman, because Batman versus Superman was like one of the top 5 most disappointing things that happened to me that year.
Right. Yeah. To a lot of people.
I could talk about that all night. You know, like that was the first time that these two 75-year-old American mythological characters were in a Hollywood film together, and it just was not treated with respect. It was like treated as a business decision to try to catch up with Marvel, and the filmmaking is just like terrible. But Ben Affleck as Bruce Wayne, you know, the way that it was framed is like he's an older Bruce Wayne who's been doing this for a while. He's really jaded. He's lost a Robin. Robin has died. And, you know, from that aspect, I think he was very believable as Bruce Wayne. So I think I think he's number 3 for me because of his Bruce Wayne performance, not because of his Batman performance.
Yeah. Okay. And just real quick, so as far as his Batman performance, was it like the suit was too big, or was it like it just was kind of?
I wasn't a fan of just the way the suit looked. I thought it was really cool that they switched suits and he made a custom suit to go fight Superman.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
Yeah.
But and he was kind of more of you know, I think that was the first time that we really got to see him create custom gadgets for the problem that he had to solve.
Yeah.
You know, whereas like every other movie, he kind of already had a solution in his back pocket, or we didn't really get to see like the thought process of like, you know, how he was figuring out how he was going to solve the problem.
Right. Kind of more of the detective side, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is like, that's a huge part for anybody who's played the Arkham Asylum games and stuff, right? That's a huge part of Batman.
Yeah.
And especially in the comics and stuff. So that kind of led more to that.
Yeah, that reminds me of like something that like my friends have always said to me since like elementary school is like, how can Batman be your favorite when he doesn't even have any superpowers? Oh, like that's the reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's going toe to toe with Superman,
right?
And he doesn't have any superpowers. So.
Exactly. Yeah, because he's smart.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
And rich. But...
Yeah. So all right. So this is where it gets tough. So I just want to see if we're on the same page, because that's pretty much as far as 5 through 1. I would say that's definitely, but this is where it could veer off a little bit. So who's number 2?
If we're talking specifically about Batman performance and not about movies as a whole, then Christian Bale.
Number 2
is number 2.
Okay.
If we're talking about best Batman movie, it's definitely The Dark Knight, hands down.
Yep.
But I don't know. I think the most well-rounded Batman / Bruce Wayne is Michael Keaton for sure.
Yeah. And so we definitely are on the same page. Like, I love Michael Keaton. I mean, just in general, but I think as the dual roles, I just, he's my favorite. But Christian Bale's close.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with how good that trilogy was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those movies are incredible.
Very cool. All right, Adam. So let's talk about M.A.N. So it's an analogy, right? Or what is that?
Anagram.
Anagram. Sorry. Yeah. An analogy. Well, it kind of is an analogy too. There's a lot of analogies. So, oh man, I'm going to get roasted in the comments for that. Okay. So, so M.A.N. stands for masculinity and neglect.
Yeah.
Or the emasculation of the unfortunate man. Cool. So I've seen the film probably like 5 or 6 times. And honestly, man, as far as student films go, or short films that I've watched over the course of the time I've been doing this, it's honestly one of my favorites because of how well done it. I mean, it helps that I know you, and I'm like super proud that I know you, and also proud of the work you did. But it is so, like, it's just a special movie, and it makes you think on a lot of levels that you didn't think you could. Which is like, if a movie that makes you think, like, we've all seen movies where you're like, that was fun, and then you move on with your life, but this movie makes you really think. And I think that's what makes it special, amongst just how well done it was. And then, not to knock student films, because there's student films like that, you know, are better than something that I could have ever have done, right? Because there's so many tools at your disposal, and you're really working with some really great, talented people. But, you know, there are a lot of student films that are forgettable, and this definitely wasn't one. And so, so I mean, I'm going to say it a million times, but you definitely have to watch it when we share the link for those listening. Like, it's great. Definitely tough subject matter, but it's something that everybody, we need to watch it, and we need to kind of have those thoughts, you know, and examine how we see it, and then how it makes us feel. Yeah. And so I think it's important. But so how did this project come about? I know it was a thesis film for school, but kind of how did this kind of all come together?
This is going to be a 2-topic kind of explanation.
Sure. Yeah.
So, the first, a little bit about me. So I'm a mixed person. My dad is 6-foot black guy. My mom is a short, blonde, white woman. And ironically, I look more like my mom. But so just, you know, my parents have been together since high school. They're still together to this day. So growing up in a household where, you know, race wasn't really discussed other than, you know, you're black, you know, or like the way that it was discussed with me was, and my brother was, my dad is chocolate syrup, my mom was milk, and you're chocolate milk, you know. And that was like all I knew. So for me growing up, it took me a long time to really realize that I did have a different perspective on race and, you know, how that affected how I interacted with the world. It was very different than a lot of people. And I think, you know, as I was going through college, I was really interested in philosophy as well as psychology. And, you know, towards the end of my bachelor's degree, I started taking a lot of African-American history classes and, you know, just started getting really interested in how we got to where we are in our American history, African-American history. So that was the first side of me wanting to make this film. And the second has to do with, you know, San Francisco State, like I said, is a really history and film theory based school. And I started really getting into filmmaking, not as a business, but as an art form. And, you know, even just like thinking about how films are made, any type of film, like even this podcast, you know, it's like you're going to cut it together and you're going to cut out some of the ums and you're going to cut out like some of the spaces. And
real quick, I don't cut out the ums and people let me know. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like there's a lot that goes into it. And especially for like narrative films, a lot of people don't realize, you know, they shoot narrative films out of order. If you're in a location, you're going to shoot all the scenes that are in that location because it's much cheaper to just be there and do what you need to do rather than, okay, let's shoot the opening of the film. Now let's travel across the country to this other location and shoot this next scene and travel back to the first location, you know.
It's not linear.
No, not at all. So, but then in the editing room, you make it linear. You know, so if that's kind of weird to think about, you know, I'm taking all of this make-believe that's shot in these different places out of chronological order and putting it in a certain order where when a human being watches it, they have a certain feeling and interpretation, and generally it tends to be unanimous, you know. I don't think a lot of people like really can see that, you know. So going deeper into film theory and history, I started to learn about a filmmaker named M.A.N, who was really prominent mainly in the 40s, but she wrote a lot as well as like shot a couple really experimental films. And she had this whole idea of what she called poetic cinema or vertical cinema. So if horizontal cinema or traditional cinema was, you know, classic Hollywood, which at the time in the early 40s, it's like Hollywood's golden age, right? It's very cookie cutter. It's very predictable. You generally know what you're getting into when you go to see a Hollywood film. It's going to be a happy ending most of the time. Her idea of poetic cinema and vertical cinema was, you know, what you see packaged in this short period of time, even though it might not tell a linear story, it might hop here and there and show, you know, imagery of a knife at one point, and then that knife all of a sudden turns into a key without explanation. You know, all of that stuff meshes together to become a poem. So it has a meaning in the same way that a poem would have meaning, even though, you know, it's not clear cut as a Hollywood film is. There is deeper meaning to all the imagery that you're seeing in this package. So, you know, when I got to my thesis film, I had a very hard time, you know, throwing that to the side, disregarding that. And especially nowadays, I think people's I think the best term to use is media literacy. This is kind of getting into another theory that I get really excited about.
Sure. Yeah.
Thinking about cinema as a language, for the longest time, written language, verbal language, that was how we passed on stories and communicated ideas through storytelling. And, like with written language, you start with a letter, and then you create words, and then you create sentences, and then paragraphs, pages, essays, books, dissertations, so on and so forth. With cinema, it's kind of the same thing. And now that we are 120-ish years into cinema as an art form, and the whole world generally is very exposed to the cinematic language, whether that be traditional movies, TV, news and broadcast, YouTube, commercials,
documentary.
Yeah, it's all using the cinematic language that most people are unconscious that they are literate in.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of. So kind of what you're saying is that we're programmed to have a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah,
right?
It's a big piece of cinematic language.
Yeah, and that this affects this, and this affects this, and this affects this, and there's character arcs and all that. And
yeah. There's this idea that Alfred Hitchcock had that he called the Kuleshov effect, which is about editing, which is that, if you see an image of an old man looking at something with a blank face, and then the next shot that you see is a child playing in a park, and then you cut back to the same shot of an old man, the assumption that you generally have is that the old man has like a heartwarming look on his face. Whereas if you were to show that same shot of the blank stare on the old man, then cut to a girl in a bikini, and then cut back to the shot of the old man, now he's a perv.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. There's like basic cinematic language like that people aren't really aware that they are literate in the same way that they are with written language, verbal language. Musical language is another really big one for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, taking that idea that nowadays, we are so overexposed to all these different types of media and are, a little bit more prepared to take on things that are not so straightforward. Cinematic poems, I think is the best way to put it. That's what I wanted to make with M.A.N.
Yeah. And you did, because and we'll get into the multiple viewings theory and all that stuff. So you kind of touched upon it, coming from a mixed race family and just your worldview and kind of your experiences. Was that the catalyst to tackle this subject, or was there events that led up to it? Or was it everything?
I think it was just, where I came from, and then in film school, learning, I was taking a lot of African American history classes towards the end of my bachelor. When I was doing a lot of these production classes, I was taking classes like the Constitution as it related to African American history. So basically, after slavery, when they needed to start creating laws around how I'm blanking on the word right now. I'm going to say Reconstruction. Yeah, reconstruct. Yeah. Laws around Reconstruction, how that was going to work, how our justice system used the Constitution to justify what they're going to do. So, learning about like the mindsets of people in that era, and seeing some of the issues that they were running into as far as race and how to classify race, and how to judge people based off of their race. it was really interesting to me to see the things that had not changed, you know, over the last 150 years, and maybe they had changed, but it had just repackaged themselves into something new.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, it was like I was saying, it was just a culmination of, you know, my life experience, but then getting to this place where now I'm learning about how to use the cinematic language in a certain way, and then a topic that I'm really interested and passionate about that I think a lot of people have trouble, you know, thinking deeply on sometimes, just because it is such a dense subject matter, like racial relations specifically in the United States. So that was really what drove me to, you know, use the film as a way to share my perspective.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because we had, I think the last time I saw you sometime last year, we had started kind of talking about that, and you, for lack of a better term, schooled me on you know, like, we don't, like, as a white man, I don't realize that even though I don't think I'm being like, or like I'm being racist, I can still be, or like insensitive, or naive, you know, and so, and that was awakening for me, because, you know, my dad is, you know, or he was, as about as progressive as you could possibly, you know, my dad was always very super interested and fascinated by African American culture. And I mean, I remember my mom telling me the story when they were first dating. I don't remember where, but they went to, it was an all African American bar, basically, because my dad wanted to hear the music. And my mom says it felt like when they walked in, the record skipped and everybody was like, look, but my dad was super comfortable there, and was, you know, and so, you know, I always felt like we were a really progressive family, but you still have your blind spots, and you still don't recognize, you know, you don't recognize how you think you're being helpful, right? But you're actually making it worse. Or, you know,
on some occasions.
So I appreciate you doing that. And it didn't, you know, obviously I just was just like, okay, I have to think about this a little bit more, you know, which is, I think, what your film does really well.
Well, don't position it like, you know, I just came in and was like, you need to think about how you're It was more like, you know, organic conversation,
exactly,
like, which is the point of like this film as well. You know, it's like this film brings up things where people are like, whoa, like what is going on here, and I'm feeling a certain way about this, and like, where is that kind of coming from? And it creates natural and organic conversation about a couple very tough topics.
Yeah, well, no, and you definitely didn't do that. I think it was like, you let me talk, which is the worst thing for me to do. And I probably said something stupid like, I like The Wire. It's one of my favorite shows. Like, it
was good though.
Yeah, like, and it was kind of like, you know, I think it was like, you were like, all right, well, hold on, like, let's examine what you just said, and I appreciate that, because it was definitely wasn't like scold. It wasn't like that at all. It was like, you made me think. You offered me some.
I appreciate your appreciation.
Yeah, no,
sincerely.
And that's why, you know, and I'm so devastated that my dad never got a chance to talk to you about it, but he saw your film and was like, I have so many questions, you know, and he loved it. I mean, he was like so blown away by the stories that you told, and wanted to talk to you about it. So that's definitely a you know, a missed opportunity for me, you know, and for both of you guys, because, you know, you would have had a great conversation. So yeah, so tell me why you want viewers, because obviously we're going to talk about, I guess you can say they're spoilers. We're going to get in depth a little bit about the film.
Yeah.
But you're okay with that because you want people to watch it multiple times.
Yeah.
And why is that?
I mean, like I was saying earlier, it's a poem to me. It's more like a poem than it is a short film. There's a lot to unpack. There are a lot of like really small nuances that, you know, I don't think, like, no one's going to be able to catch everything that I put in there, because it's, everything was thought out, you know. The the only two names that are really spoken are Martin and Malcolm.
Mm-hmm.
And if you pay attention to, how each one of those characters faces the trouble that they get into, it's representative of, fighting back versus being passive, and like what African American history has kind of shown us is the result of both of those. The whole second half takes place in an industrial park, which, a big piece of African American history is that, the Industrial Revolution was indirectly funded by 400 years of slavery, or the profits, that weren't going to the slaves, kind of helped jumpstart the Industrial Revolution. There's just a lot of stuff like that is really nuanced that, even just you might have caught like the Martin and Malcolm thing, but, the Industrial Revolution, there's a lot of stuff in there like that, you're not going to catch. But like a friend of mine told me, as I was kind of explaining that same thing to him, those details, you might not necessarily catch them and be able to verbalize them, but you can feel them. So I think that's why the multiple viewings has been important.
Cool. So it's set in the 1800s or after 1865.
Yeah.
Right. And then in the beginning, and then it switches to present day, so to speak, in an industrial park. And you use the same character, like the same actors.
Yeah. Same five actors.
And then they play different but almost similar parts depending on your worldview. Your interpretation. Yeah. So that's a part of the poem, right? And that's a part of and forgive me for forgetting the director from the 40s.
M.A.N. Dern.
Yeah. So that's that's in her cinematic poem type view, right?
Yeah. I think the biggest piece of this film, I talk a lot about what my interpretation of the film is, but I made this readily knowing that, when you create any type of art and you put it out into the world, it's no longer what the artist thinks it is, but how the world ingests it. But that was a big part of like how I approached making this film was, every character, both past and present, black or white, are generally stereotypical, but they are also human enough where you can kind of interpret a story from what's happening. But the reason why I did that was, what a lot of people don't realize, like what we were talking about earlier with media literacy, for any type of media, not just cinema, but, a writing sample, the news, a photo, movie, whatever, for it to mean anything to you, not only are you ingesting information, but you're also projecting something back onto it. So a big piece of this film is realizing that, who you are as a person, what your worldview is, your socioeconomic status, your racial identity, your gender is really going to force what you focus on and how you interpret what happens in the film. So essentially it's a mirror. So, that I was saying to people, like I had a lot of resistance from a lot of people, actually, especially SF State, some of the professors, I'll take that back. They were extremely supportive, and the type of film that I decided to make was actually not really what I was supposed to make, but I was so passionate about wanting to make this film and, was able to articulate what it was supposed to be so well that they were extremely supportive of it. But yeah, so I kept saying to a lot of people that when I was making this film, I feel like my only shield, other than, I have a director's statement that I wrote after the fact, but my only shield against saying like what I think this movie is about is the title, and a lot of people wanted me to change the title, but I was like, no, a lot of people don't understand why it's called M.A.N. or what the acronym actually means. But to me, that's my only defense as to like, this movie, from my perspective, spoiler alert, is not really about racial relations. That's just the vehicle. The film is about masculinity and neglect, or the emasculation of the unfortunate man, meaning what happens when masculinity is used as a tool, or, the hot word nowadays, or the hot phrase nowadays, is toxic masculinity, which is funny. It's like, I made this film 2 years ago. Well, actually we shot it like 2.5, almost 3 years ago. And, up to this point, I've been very hesitant about releasing it, but as time has gone on, I made this film before the Me Too movement and before Time Was Up. And, to me, this film is really about what happens when you use masculinity as a tool to boost your own ego, and the repercussions, the neglect that goes into that, that trickles down hundreds of years across culture and social boundaries, and is in the air in ways that I don't think a lot of people are really thinking about.
No, I mean, that's incredible. I mean, I didn't even and that's the thing, is that you just keep peeling back more layers of this film, and it's just like, this is this is a student film, and you made like like a masterpiece to an extent. No, because it's like, I didn't even think about it as I totally thought it was about race.
I mean, it is.
Yeah, but it is deeper than that. Just like the topic of race is.
Yeah.
So, but it just, I didn't know that. I thought I knew. Again, that's just me thinking I know everything, right? That's kind of back to the point we were talking about before, as far as when I think I'm helping. I think it's like, it's a man thing, but I think it's even more of like a white man thing, because you try to fix everything. Ask any of my ex-girlfriends, like, I try to fix everything, like, and I always think I have the answer, and it's always because I'm trying to help, but you don't realize, like,
yeah. I mean, I do the same thing.
Yeah, but again, there's just so many layers to this film, and
yeah,
I think
there's a lot going on.
Yeah. No, and that's and so kind of getting, you kind of were talking about with your professors, or how the professors kind of took it. So you've had, how many showings have you had?
Public showings with Q&A, 3. Yeah, 3 or 4. 3 or 4.
Cool. And so one of the things that you were kind of telling me about, I think last year, when some of these were going on, and that was always your fascination and curiosity, was the reactions that you would get. Because again, you want people to watch this multiple times. You want to discuss it.
Yeah.
You want to know what people see or what they feel from it and things. So what are some reactions that you expected, that you received?
I made this film knowing that I was going to offend people, both black and white. I felt like more so black people than white. But generally the reaction that I've gotten, which to me also kind of confirms that I made what I think I made, is that, people tend to take it and use it to justify what they think. I've had a lot of liberals that told me that the film has a very liberal message, and a message of hope. And I've had some conservative people who have told me that the message of the film is largely conservative. I have, of course, had people who, were offended, but I think those reactions have more come from secondhand. My friend has shown their friend the film, and the reaction to some, not all of it, but some aspects of it, was they were kind of offended. but you know, that's the nature of the subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like I've misrepresented any, you know, it's a film,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and again, it's a poem, you
Mm-hmm.
know. I'm, I feel like the statements that I've made are, you know, they're, I try to stay very general
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of different subject matter that's in the film, but by doing that, by combining a lot of those general things, it becomes more specific, and you start to see a larger picture.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. Again, and this is exactly what you wanted, was for people to watch it and have their own interpretations. But it's interesting to me that people would find a conservative message in it.
So you think the message was largely liberal?
I don't know that I feel that way either. I don't know that I ever came on the political side of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair.
It literally was like a black or white thing, you know? And so, don't judge me. I know, I'm teasing. No. But again, these are the conversations that are like that. That's the cool part, is that you got people talking about it, right?
Yeah.
And watching it. And because if you don't get any reaction,
Yeah.
if people are just go,
Yeah. Which that is another reaction that I've gotten, you know, also tends to be secondhand, but you know, I have, a good friend of mine he worked on the film, and he's Filipino. I remember when I was cutting the film and, you know, shopping it around to different people just to gauge reaction. He showed it to his mom, and he told me, to her, it was everything that we've already seen with 12 Years a Slave, and, you know, what's happening in the news, or at the time, what was happening in the news with, African American and police violence, and we've already seen all that. Yeah.
huh. Okay. Well, again, it's subjective, right? And
It's
that's
very subjective.
So that's And so was that, maybe, because I wanted to ask you the reactions that you didn't expect. Was that one you didn't expect? Or?
I did not expect that.
Yeah.
No. And to me, well, no, I'm not going to say like which way I think, but the political reactions, I kind of didn't expect, you know, that both sides would
claim it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, and again, this would be, I'm sure I would love to have you back and we can talk about a lot of different things, but it doesn't surprise me. Everybody wants to claim, it's the gangs trying to claim something that they think is telling their message, versus the other one trying to claim that it's telling their message. And it's not surprising to me.
Yeah.
But I could see how you weren't planning on that.
I was not.
Well, cool. So, I mean, again, for those listening and those watching, we'll provide links so that you can watch it. And I know Adam would love to get your feedback and comments. And so what's well, actually, before we get to this, so is there anything else that you want the audience to know about M.A.N. and you know, just kind of any closing statements on the film? Besides, go watch it.
Yeah, go watch
and share it and talk about it.
Yeah, keep an open mind, and you know, I think the most important part of the film is the conversation that happens afterwards. And you know, you can't always have a conversation with the filmmaker, you know, but I think, you know, just the conversations that it sparks, and then also understanding that, you know, it is a mirror. It's very subjective how you interpret this film, which is the point, you know, that I hope is the point of the film, is to open much larger conversations and for people to reflect on their own ignorance on certain topics, or their own bias on certain topics. You know, I think one thing a lot of Americans don't really think about is, like, if you're not from the United States and you don't have a knowledge of African American history, or just American history in general, you're not going to get the correlation between the two different time periods. If you're from Europe and you have a glancing knowledge of African American history, then you'll get it. But this whole film hinges on you and your knowledge of what happened between these, or during the two time periods, 1865 and present day, but also everything that happened in between, civil rights movement, Reconstruction, everything. So just keep an open mind.
Okay. Very cool. So what's next for you? Is there any short films or any kind of thing that you're working on?
I have a couple different projects that I'm working on right now, and I want to shoot at least one this year. I'm kind of at a point where, everything that I make, I want it to be bigger than the last thing. And M.A.N was a huge project for me at the time. I'm kind of caught between, doing something that, like Maya Deren would have put it, is more traditional horizontal cinema, and continuing to do things that are more vertical cinema, poetic cinema. I think, like I was saying earlier, nowadays, people's palettes and their understanding, their comprehension of films and cinema and videos is complex enough where I can continue to make films, maybe not as complex and jam-packed as M.A.N, but something that is more like a poem that can communicate an idea in a way that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get in any other form, not just traditional cinema, but writing or verbal language or music or whatever.
No, and I hope you do that, because I think, as we both could talk for hours on the subject, Hollywood needs new stories and new ways of telling stories. And as much as I want to see a Frasier remake, just kidding. No, but as much as we love our favorite things from our childhood being brought back, you want films that make you think and see the world differently and challenge you, whether it's like Inception. It's totally different for its time, and of course we can go on and on about all the different types of movies that have come out in the last 10 years that we're like, wow, I've never seen that before. So I hope you stay on that path and continue to do stuff, because again, I'm just super impressed and proud of what you accomplished. And
thanks, man.
It's just the work you're doing. I just can't wait to see what you come up with next, and I definitely look forward to the opportunity to collaborate and do something.
Of course.
So where could people, so as far as with the new projects coming up, but also, so what would be a good place for people to follow you, whether it's Instagram or?
I'm most active on Instagram right now. Otherwise there's my website. It's just mixedbeast.com.
Okay.
But most of what I'm posting, is Instagram, which in some ways I also treat as another art form, but it's my life. You know?
And what's your Instagram handle?
@mixedbeast.
Very cool. So cool. Yeah. So I definitely, I again encourage everybody listening and watching to check out M.A.N, and then also follow Adam on Instagram @mixedbeast, to keep up to date with all the new and cool stuff he'll be doing in the future. So cool. Thanks again, Adam, just thank you for being on. It's awesome.
No, thanks for having me. I always love talking about movies, so especially my movies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then, we'll have to, I think Jason Kleberg, right? Yeah. Yeah. So Kleberg and I started, and actually that's something I gotta edit too. We started doing a movie podcast. Oh, cool. Just kind of for fun on the side. So we'll have to get you on. And,
I would love to.
Yeah, and just kind of geek out on all that stuff.
Yeah. Cool.
So cool. All right. Well, thanks again, Adam, and thanks to everybody else for listening and watching. And we'll see you next time.